We are beginning the second session of Badaliyya-Philippines Study Group. The first session was on the introduction of the series of conferences and some personal experiences at the very beginning. The second session will be on my personal venture or my personal journey in living with Muslims, particularly in Mindanao, specifically in Datupiang or Dulawan, that is in the province of Maguindanao. It all happened when I was a young priest wanting to engage in dialogue with Muslims in the southern Philippines that I asked my superior to be assigned in Dulawan. Dulawan will be about 98% Muslim population and 2% Christians. I told my superior, that is the religious superior then, that that would be very ideal for me because the 2% Christians will be my support, at least to practice my priesthood, at least mass on Sunday and some days during the week. And there is a school there, Notre Dame of Dulawan, that I can work with. But most of the work will be living with the Muslims, uh, being with them in solidarity with them. This will be in 1975. So I moved to Datupyong in May 1975. And I began my journey first and foremost to learn the language that is Maguindanao. I told myself that if I want to be inserted in the community of Muslims in Dulawan, that I have to speak their language. And I began also to study the culture of the Bangsamoro, particularly of the Sultanate of the Upper River, and that will be Raja Buwayan. And to see the prominent families related into the royalty of the Sultanate of Raja Buwayan. So there, I got involved in the school community extension and with the Meronor sisters, planning what kind of solidarity work that we will be able to engage with the Muslims, particularly in times of crisis. This will be the height of the martial law and prior to the peace agreement that will happen in December 1976. And during that time, there'll be a real war between the Philippine government on the one hand, the troops, and on the other will be the Moro National Liberation Front. And there was an allegation then that most of the Moro National Liberation Front members and officials were alumni either of Notre Dame of Dulawan, the school where I belonged to then in 1975, and Notre Dame University. So because of that, the military would not know how to deal with me and how to deal with us vis-a-vis our express solidarity with the struggle of the Moro people. Something happened in July, that is the second week of July, then 14, the opening of classes, the school year 1975 and 74. Uh, I was at a meeting with the Merino sisters in our Social Action Center in Dulawan, in the clinic, Notre Dame Clinic, planning what we're going to do for the school year 75-76. And it will be around 9 o'clock. That means the beginning of the second period when we heard a big explosion. A grenade was lobbed in the classroom of the second year high school. Actually, two grenades were lobbed in the two sections of second year high school. One was a dud, and the other one exploded. This will be second year high school. So the students will be in the ages or age range between, say, 12 to 14. So it was very, very loud explosion inside the classroom. A grenade exploded. I immediately rushed to the classroom because there was pandemonium. All the students running wild, seeking for safety. Me and other girls went immediately to the classroom where the grenade exploded. And it was a big shock to me to see bodies falling, many wounded. And I picked up one wounded by the name of Abdul Rahman Tungao, and I carried him in my arms and would like to rush him to the clinic. But sometime when I was still in the campus, somebody told me that he has expired, so he was dead. Well, not thinking, I just brought him down. All my shirt was full of blood, but went to the classroom to continue evacuating the students to safety. That was a very traumatic experience to me when somebody expired in your arm, a victim of this war, uh, the more war against the Philippine government during the war of the 70s. And seven people died, and two of them I buried. One will be a Christian by the name of Samuel Chu, and the other one, the one I carried, will be Abdul Rahman Tungao. Uh, The memory of these two were so powerful in me that I dedicated my first book on Islam, the issues that divide Muslim and Christians, to Sami Chu as well as to Abdul Rahman Tungao. So their names are forever etched in my heart because I was a young priest then. I was only 28 years old. And my first violent experience, and it's so traumatic that the names forever written in my heart, in my psyche. So with Sister Patricia, and meron a sister, we were looking for the parents of Abdul Rahman Tungao to give the news that their son was a casualty in the war, in that explosion. We met the father near the municipal hall of Dapitiang, and I informed the father that Abdul Rahman or Abdul passed away in the explosion. But while still speaking, the mother came and, to my surprise, embraced the feet of her husband and was wailing. That was a very powerful image that has remained in me. But the father told me that, like Job, in scripture, that God has given, God has taken away. As a young man, I was telling the father that have no fear, justice will be done, will not stop until justice is done. But in Mindanao, especially during the war, no justice is done. Even today, what usually happen is that you bury your dead, you lick your wounds, and you muster enough courage to move forward. So no justice was done. So it was then rumored, or we were informed, that at that year, 75, the official policy of the Moro National Liberation Front was to close the schools so that they will have young warriors to fight the government. And one way to force people to close school will be precisely the launching of grenades, explosion in the school. So we engaged the MNLF for conversation and dialogue because some of the leading commanders were graduates of Notre Dame of Dalawan and are known to us. And of course, they said no. And then, but they are casualties of war, casualties of the struggle of the Moro people for their homeland and for their freedom. And we were prepared by the leadership to close the school, and the parents also, for the safety of their children, to close the school. It was so traumatic on my part that actually I will not even mention the name of the Lawan was so painful. And I thought that I will work at the social action with Bishop Nepomuceno, who was in charge of social action and covered Dulawan on weekend with a few Christians there. But my superior appointed me as pastor in Kabakan. So I will not deal on that particular work as pastor, but continue to deal with that failure, that painful, bitter experience in that of young, marking the deaths of young people, seven and about 40 wounded in that explosion inside the school of second year high school. I was full of idealism, working with them in solidarity with the struggle of the Moro people, trying to learn the language and trying to be one with them. And it was indeed very painful to experience death and attack, you see, and on the lives of young people, things that I could not understand and could not accept. As a matter of fact, too, that many of our teachers were so afraid and never thought that fear can be so paralyzing. And to the point that some of our teachers were running high fever, and I was told that they need to be evacuated. So they were evacuated to Cotabato City because they were vomiting, they were running high fever, and it was only because of fear. So there were two people, religious, were left in Dulawan during that interregnum or during immediately after the war to the closure. That will be Sister Joan, a Merino sister, because the rest of the sisters were evacuated in Cotabato City and myself. So definitely we were living in fear, but at the same time, only prayer actually sustained us during those weeks that we were there in isolation, in fear, and feeling alone and abandoned. And the whole atmosphere of war you see in the place. And then finally, Father Joe Arong, one of the first counselors of the province, told that we don't, the school is closed. They asked the whole thing to be closed, so no need to be there. So move forward. And I moved forward by being assigned in Dulawan. The thing is that on the one hand, you have the enthusiasm to work with the Muslims, and on the other hand, you were met by the violence, uh, by things that you cannot explain. So I was torn, definitely torn between the two. But what prevailed will be the trauma. Later on, some people told me that I suffered sort of post bomb traumatic experience syndrome. But what I did then was to put that in a closet and lock the closet, and then never open the closet again and put that and buried that. You see, I never reconciled myself with it. I never questioned it anymore, but definitely, and mention of the name and mention of the incident was a harrowing experience on me. So it was very difficult. So for a while, I said that I was remain silent because I'm committed to living with a Muslim and holding them in the high esteem, notwithstanding this negative experience, personal experience. I thought that it was what we call a betrayal of trust, a betrayal of enthusiasm to work with them. That was my reading then in 1975. And having experienced, actually, I was most probably a war victim in a way myself, in this particular instance. So I put that, as I said, in a closet, tuck, lock, and barrel. And however, trying to maintain my commitment not to be overcome by any negativity on this particular war, and considering and reflecting that the victims were primarily Muslims themselves. You see, one Christian only was a victim, and that was Samuel Chu. So all the victims were Muslims. So meaning to say that the bomb was not really meant for Notre Dame. The bomb was not really meant for Christians because, as I said, there were only 2% at that time. 98% were Muslims. Similarly, our students. So if there will be somebody who will harbor bitterness, it will be the Muslim because they were the victims themselves of that particular bombing. The lesson taught afterwards is to face that I mean, we need to face that reality, to grapple with it, and to grapple with pain. What I did is to escape and to lock that in a closet. And because of that, there was no healing. So it took some time, perhaps on my second comeback, my return to that of Yang, that I had the healing. So after 4 years working among the Christians in activism, and that is in left politics because that was the height of martial law, and setting aside and putting in bracket my commitment to the Muslim struggle for a while. So because of that, I became very controversial, particularly in the struggle for national liberation and national democracy. That I was threatened. My life was threatened, and the provincial thought that I better go on exile and study Islam deeper. That's why I went to the Middle East. There, I studied Arabic and studied Islam deeply. And on my return, after 2 or 3 years living outside, I don't know what to do, but the same provincial who sent me to the Middle East, told me to go back to Dulawan, the place of my fall, you see. So I was shocked by it. I don't know what to do. So then I was forced to face the reality and grapple the reality of that bitter experience I had in 1975, 76, school year 75, 76. So I didn't know what to do. So perhaps the first reaction that I had was to go to the Merino sisters, my co-workers. And at dinner, I told them that my superior was assigning me back to Latupiang. And I don't know what to do because of that traumatic experience. The older sister, Sister Patricia, who worked in Dolawan for 18 years, who was crying when we abandoned Dolawan and he wanted to die in Dolawan, told me, "Have no fear, Father Juni." She told me, "I will accompany you. Together, we go back to Datupiang, to Dolawan." And to cut the whole story short, she accompanied me. She stayed there for a while, and through the discourses of our experiences in 75, 76 in Datupiang, the conflict, the killings, the murders, the massacres, not knowing what to do, but in a way, our conversation was very cleansing. And meeting the people that, notwithstanding all the bitterness and the pain, are able to continue living and to continue to live in hope. So it was very fascinating the resilience of people of Datopiang that after the bitterness of war, after the bitterness of their loved ones being murdered, massacred, and killed, are able to pick up the pieces and always begin anew. You see, so it was a big challenge to me. So I told myself that perhaps, yeah, my coming back to Darawan is God's God's desire, perhaps, so that I'll be able to confront painful experiences, bitterness, and grapple with it, and knowing that God is there besides me, and friends are there also, and the people are there to help me rise up, pick up the pieces, and move forward. So, in a way, that is a very, very good experience on my part, working with the Muslims. It's not all roses, you see, there are thorns. You see. As a matter of fact, a fall and trauma, you see, on my part. But nevertheless, I'm able to go back, you see, to stand up and pick up the pieces and make things whole again. And I suppose that will be very important in living with the Muslims, particularly during those times. And even today, as we know very well, because of terrorism, because of fundamentalism, because of radical Islam, so much killing, that we have to, perhaps that is the challenge, we have to rise, you see, again and again, you see, every time we fall, and again, pick up the pieces and make whole. And precisely because of our ability to rise and pick up the pieces, we become icons, you see, of hope for many people. And by just seeing us, you see, they're able to rise up, pick up the pieces, and move forward. So that is the second powerful experience for me, and perhaps this experience shaping a type of spirituality, of Christian spirituality, amidst conflict and amidst, you see, two religions colliding. So Islam at the seemingly colliding, because at that time, during the time of war, soldiers are always considered to be Christians, government considered to be Christian, and on the other hand, rebels considered to be Muslim, And the insurgency will be Islam, Moro National Liberation Front. So between the two colliding stones of forces, you see, we are all called victims and victims of war, tragedy of humanities. But nevertheless, there we cannot escape from these tragedies of humanity. And God gives us the grace and the strength to be able to grapple with these ambiguities, with these contradictions, with this conflict, and not to harbor bitterness and hatred, but rather to be able to rise, pick up the pieces, and begin anew. Every time we fall, we are invited to rise. And precisely that is perhaps an aspect of spirituality that is demanded of Christians today, particularly in this day of ISIS, Islamic fundamentalism, or other ideological fundamentalists that kill, you see. And we do not understand this killing. We do not understand this violence. We do not understand these ongoing sacrifices, you see, human sacrifices, tragedies of humanity. But nevertheless, we see we continue to live in hope that one day this will come to an end. Perhaps not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime, or any other's lifetime, but definitely it will come to an end. And that is precisely our hope. And because we hold on to that hope and to that God of mercy and compassion, that we are able to rise every time we fall. And every time we are shattered into pieces, we are able to gather anew and be planted anew. And there begin to grow and bear fruit. And sometimes there'll be again another war, another conflict, and then another cutting, you see. But this will not discourage us. This will not deter us. And that is a very important aspect of developing or shaping a spirituality, not only between Muslims and Christians, but also in a spirituality in the midst of conflict, in the midst of war, in the midst of this violence that we cannot understand. And I will stop this second session here, and we will continue. As I said, the third session, there will be three sessions for this first Friday of September, and this will be on on feast days that I participated in my lifetime.